Yeah, people think, about vanity metric, right? Like how many downloads, how many people viewed it. But in the end, at least the businesses we work with care about the quality of the person or business owner that's actually engaging and listening to it over the sheer numbers.
Hello to everyone and welcome to our Ecom Business podcast. My name is Anatoliy Labinskiy, and today we have one wonderful guest who's gonna be surprise you with what is his business all about and his expertise. And this is something what's for sure gonna be valuable for some of you who is trying to brand it themselves or build a brand around them, around their names, because in our years of the internet or of all these kind of social media, it's very important to understand where you have to be and how to show up on the right way in front of your audiences. So let me just introduce a short background of our guest and who is he. Our guest today is Dr. Jeremy Weisz, and he is running one of the top leading companies, Rise 25, which is helping several CEOs and founders in the industries, in different industries around the world, to show up and into being interviewed with the best possible speakers, and in the same time helping them to pop up their podcasts, which is like he is the real professional on the podcast industry since 2010. He started the first podcast and helping the leaders on the different spaces to launch that when nobody even was understanding what this podcast was. But in the same time, this person in the past was just chiropractic specialist and having massage facilities in Chicago. And over 15 years, he was doing that kind of business and just decided to sold out everything, and he founded a supplement brand where he understood that he can move forward now to something different, and he opened for himself back in 2010 the podcast industries. Well, I just want to welcome Dr. Jeremy Weisz. Today is with us, and he will share with you golden nuggets about how to be a better brand builder around the podcast. Hello, Dr. Jeremy. How are you doing?
Anatoliy, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
Awesome. Like I really surprising about how valuable it would be today for our audience, because they listen a lot of, e-commerce space specialists, CEOs, whatever, like different things which is can be close to them straight away. But today's subject and your industry could show them how they really can be like build a real business card for themselves by implementing things such as podcasts. And I just want to listen from your side, what is like your background, why you decided to go that way, especially after the massage facilities which you were running and supplement brands. How did you become that kind of specialist, and how is that going for you right now?
Yeah, like you said, I run Rise 25 with my business partner, John Corcoran. We help people with strategy, accountability, and full execution for a podcast. And it's funny, I say most things in my life, not everything that's good tracks back to a podcast. I did not meet my wife on a podcast, so that is not included, but I met my business partner, John Corcoran, because of podcasting. And so I've just formed amazing relationships, and that's how we met, right? I form amazing relationships that transcend business. It goes into I go to people's weddings who I've had on the podcast. I go on family vacations with people I've had on the podcast, and you form these real relationships. But like you said, I have a weird background, right? My background's in biochemistry and as a chiropractor. And since I was a little kid, I saw my dad, he had really bad neck pain, and he went to a lot of doctors, and they said there's nothing they can really do. For years, he kind of suffered through it. And finally, one of his friends said, "Hey, you should really see a chiropractor." And he's like, "I've tried everything." And he decided to try it. And after a couple months, he was almost 100% better. So I saw him go through that when I was young, and I decided, wow, this is pretty amazing. I think this is something I'd like to do. And so I ended up going into that profession. But when you're in, chiropractic school and you have your business, they don't teach you business, right? In chiropractic school or professional school. So I had to go to different marketing conferences and different places to learn the business side of things, okay? And through those conferences, early on, I think it was maybe 2006, there was a small group of people that were talking about this medium of podcasting and doing interviews, and that just resonated with me because my philosophy in life is I try and give first, right? And just say, hey, how can I help you? I'm not asking or expecting anything in return. How can I help you? And I saw it as a platform that I can profile the people while I get to learn that I admire, and put them on my platform and then spread the word through all the channels, right? Because one 30-minute conversation, as you know, can go across 20 different places, right? And so that's how I first started. I was introduced to podcasts because it was like just different online marketing, online marketing conference back in 2006, and we were just chatting. And so from there, at that point, most people had never heard of a podcast or what it was. And that's how I got into it. And so ever since, I've helped shows, I've had my show, and just people would reach out and say, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And then slowly over time, we just started helping more and more companies launch and run their podcast. So, and I can go into, from an e-commerce, I know you focus a lot on e-commerce brands. There's a 5-step process I think about when you are doing a podcast, and this kind of transcends, forget podcasts. Like you're like, Jeremy, I never want to do a podcast. That's fine. You could still use this with, let's say you do blog posts or whatever you like to do, that I can talk through that would help an e-commerce brand as well. So I can go through some of those, but that's how I got into it. And when I think of an e-commerce brand or any brand growing, I think of, the first step that we talk about when we're starting to work with clients is formulating a Dream 100 list. Okay. And the Dream 100 list, most people think of it as a client list. And for us, it's not just a client list. It's a referral partner, strategic partner, authorities in the space. I mean, potential clients could be on the list. Also current clients. So there's creating that Dream 100. When I think of an e-commerce brand, you can go into the influencers, right? So like, let's say you're selling a $100 product or $200 product. How do you really leverage the medium of podcasting? Well, what if like you're a health and fitness, brand, and you had some of the top health and fitness influencers or people talking about what they do, right? And you're also introducing the product to them indirectly because they're going to see, oh, this person's the founder of XYZ health and fitness brand. So on my podcast, I've had interesting, like all over the map. I've had the founder of RX Bar, Quest Nutrition, P90X. We talk about e-commerce. I had the Harmon brothers, Daniel Harmon, founder of Harmon Brothers, who, if you haven't seen some of their YouTube videos for like Purple Mattress and some of the videos that have gone viral, Poopery, they created those for the e-commerce, for some of these e-commerce brands, right? So you can use these things no matter what type of company you have, but I always think of the Dream 100 and who falls under the referral partners, strategic partners, influencers, authorities, and then also clients, and then potential clients.
You were mentioning it like you went for the conference in 2006, which is blow my mind. I will tell you, because I found out what is e-commerce or whatever it is, like some related stuff back in 2017, and you are since 2006 starting that. And everything what you're saying now, I mean, how you build it and how it's helping for the brands to grow by just a really 30 minutes conversation could help out to generate new connections and be invited to different places. Like how that was for you when you started. I mean, because now you are easily can invite almost everyone on the podcast and speak to them, and because you're like kind of a leader on the space. So what is gonna be your suggestion, and according to your feedback, according to your background, what was the struggles, bottlenecks when you were starting, especially when podcasts were not famous?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is a common question I get, Anatoliy, which is, if I'm just starting out, I have no podcast, how do I get guests? How do I get great guests? And I wish it was a complicated answer. It's not. It's very, very simple. Okay. You start with the people you know. And usually everyone has some network, right? You pick up your phone, who's in your phone, who's your Facebook, who's in your LinkedIn that you're close with. And, you know, being any, like, let's say you were just starting today with yours, you look in, you go, you probably have a great network of e-commerce people that'd be great to have on. So don't go to the coldest of cold and to necessarily your absolute dream guests. You start with your circle of people you know. And then from there, like if I had, you know, you on and say, hey, Anatoliy, you were awesome. Who else? Here's what I'm looking for, right? I just did a webinar the other day for a high level mastermind group. And I talked a little bit about this, which is you want to be real specific with your ask, but you're asking people that like you, you know, they know you. So, but you have to be real specific with the ask. So if we're friends now. So I'd be like, Anatoliy, if I was looking for CEOs of e-commerce brands, you could get really niche with it. I want a CEO of e-commerce brand in the health and beauty space, right? That is in Canada or wherever, in the US, whatever region you want. And that is, you know, donates money to a nonprofit. I mean, you could get as specific as you want, who you want. So I say, hey, here's who I'm looking for. Who do you think I should have on? Who do you know? And usually everyone knows one or two people or three people. So early on, even now, each guest introduces me to a couple other guests. And those guests introduce me to a couple other guests. And so before you know it, you have a ton of people that you can reach out to, you know? And here's the thing. There's an episode I did. I encourage people, if you're thinking about podcasting, you should listen to. We talk about the 5 different types of episodes everyone should create if you have a podcast. And this is a B2B podcast. So it's not like really applying to a comedy podcast or a true crime podcast. This is a business, if someone has a business for their podcast. So there's 5 different types of episodes. One of those types is a large authority in the space, okay? Whatever that space is. You don't need every interview to be a well-known person. You just need a few, because if I'm reaching out to you and I say, Anatoliy, I'd love to have you on. I've had the co-founder of Pixar, P90X, RX. I can list 4 or 5 just for, in copywriting 101, even in the e-commerce world, you want social proof. Like, people are looking for reviews. People are looking for, has this worked? What's the social proof? Well, that's the same thing. When I'm reaching out to people I don't know, I need to include social proof. And that social proof comes from a few of those big authority. But I got to those big authorities through warm introductions oftentimes, right? Because people in my network knew these people and introduced me. So it's not as complicated as people think. You start with people you know and then grow from there.
It's an amazing answer because it really sounds simple, and I will tell you that I started a couple of my first guests were friends. I mean, in my industry, successful guys, and like, hey, would you mind to be on the podcast? My first guest was my mentor. I mean, like, listen, I'm starting podcast. You're supposed to be the first. He like, it will be my pleasure.
Exactly. He's not going to go, no, right?
Yeah.
He's your mentor, and you had your friends. And then usually they know other great people too.
Exactly. And that's what, like, I understood. Okay, fine. That's awesome. So when you started, you didn't have a problems with the right guess, which is already like makes things more simple, because people usually do not start because they were thinking. But how did you get, in your opinion, the attention and eyeballs on your interviews that people like, okay, that's thing I have to listen, and you start grow your audience around that and really generate a good back end of the crowd?
That's a great question. So going back to what I was saying before, there's 5 steps that I think about if you want to profit with a podcast. Okay. Not just do a podcast, but for it to be sustainable and for people to keep doing it, for myself to keep doing it, it's got to result in some type of actual revenue for the business, right? Because it's time, it's energy, it's money. So you want to make sure that those efforts are rewarded, right? And so one of the steps, so like the first step is create the Dream 100. And I'm getting to your question because this is kind of the fourth step in the process. The first step is create your Dream 100, which I talked a little bit about. The next is get ROI with outreach, which is reaching out. And you asked about that, which is you want to reach out, starting with the people that you know, and then kind of going out from there. And then the next piece is the art and science of producing amazing content. You want it to be great so that people love sharing it and people like listening and watching it. And then the fourth is build your give loop and grow your reach. Okay. And the fifth is turning your podcast into profits. But the fourth one is what you asked about, which is build your give loop and grow your reach. The interesting part is, being the next Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan is nearly impossible. Okay. And that's not what I set out to do. And especially if you're in a specific business niche, I am our philosophy is quality over quantity, right? So if there's not, I don't need millions and millions of people listening to the show, but you grow your reach organically because guess what? If I go into LinkedIn right now, I could probably find in the last 2 weeks, 5 different posts of previous guests. I produce 2 to 3 episodes a week on InspiredInsider. 5 to 6 posts from guests that posted about the show and about the interview, and there's a bunch of comments and likes and everything like that. But so the point is, when you have an interview show, there's an inherent organic reach because your guests are going to share it and their network of people are going to see it. So as it may not be like millions of people, like I just looked yesterday, one of my guests this past week shared, put it on their LinkedIn, and there were like 35 people. There are people in their network that liked it, and there were like 6 comments, and I didn't do anything to promote. Now I shared it and then I liked it, and because we're sharing across our platforms too, but they share it. So there's a small group of high quality business owners and people seeing that. And that's what I care about, is really that the guest is proud of it and that their network is seeing what they do. Because you remember, in the interview, we're highlighting what the other person is doing. They can use it as a marketing tool, and so I want it to result in possible business for them. When I have a guest on, I want to share it and get them in front of someone that would maybe use their services or maybe doesn't know about them. And so when you produce something like that, they're going to want to share it, right? So the eyeballs, people focus a lot on downloads and subscribers. I focus on the guest, giving as much as possible to the guest, creating this amazing piece of content that they can, you were on my podcast, right? And you shared some amazing information and you highlighted and walked through a couple case studies that any e-commerce company could use to grow their business. Now, if they so choose to use you, they could, but it's helpful information. And so the eyeballs are quality over quantity. And it grows organically because your guests will be sharing it.
Like I completely understand and I can agree with you. I just saw kind of my personal experience on your answer. Like recently I went to agency founder event, and I've been in August on the podcast where I was sharing my story, especially about the war in Ukraine and who I am and all my background. And that podcast, it's one of my friends holding that they don't have crazy audience. They don't have anything like millions or whatever. They have a couple of thousand to 10,000 listeners in the podcast. And on YouTube, it's only a video have been watched maybe 400 people, maybe less. But when I came in Nashville and I was surrounded by our industry, the quality of people who watching them, who listening them, it's the matter. Because when I came in the like we won cigar club and like, hey Anatoliy, like, hey, I have watched your podcast, it's insane, man. You were like, I love your story. I said, I don't love my story, come on. Like, you know, and like, yeah, I listen your story, it's amazing. And it was every single person like who I met, because it means it's their industry, it's their people, they were listening, they were watching it, and this is the quality, this is what's matter, how deep they're gonna be listening and how people gonna be talking about your podcast. I agree with you, that's awesome.
Yeah, people think, you know, about vanity metric, right? Like how many downloads, how many people viewed it, but in the end, you know, at least the businesses we work with care about the quality of the person or business owner that's actually engaging and listening to it over the sheer numbers.
Yeah, and like if your like listeners listening till the end, or at least biggest part of the audio, it means that it's really audience which is you have to focus on. It's really people who matter about what you're saying, and this is like you when you are speaking to different founders on different industries, different companies, it's hard to generate that kind of attention of people, because like it's completely different industries, the people who you're talking to. So basically your audience, it's like a business owners in different industries just trying to be better CEO, better founders, better investors, or whatever. Am I right? Like something like that?
Exactly. You know, they're sharing their experiences. So no matter what business it is, they're talking about the same issues, right? Leadership, staff, hiring, marketing, sales, all of them go across all these industries.
Can you share with me the most craziest podcast episode which you could remember? I mean, everything went completely out of your hands, you know, completely like something what you were not planning, and you're like, oh my God, when it would be finished. I mean, maybe not that kind of critical, but maybe some funny or crazy situation happened in your experience.
Yeah, let me think about that. I mean, after doing it for years, I recommend simplicity, right? And so people are like, well, what? You know, people ask me a lot about the technology setup and everything like that. And so simplicity, you know, a USB mic and Zoom. Okay. So because of the simplicity, there aren't so many like crazy things. Like people get on Zoom and we have a conversation, right? And where I see things happening, it happened, I was talking to someone the other day, they do in-person interviews, they have a 2-camera setup, and then the audio from the other person didn't work through the interview. And now they have to re-record the interview.
Oh.
And it comes with the complication, the complexity, right? Even if you're in the same city, until you come visit me in Chicago, you're like, let's do a podcast. I go, I still wouldn't do it in person, because it just creates more complication. Like, you go in the office next door to me, Anatoliy, turn on the computer, get on Zoom, and let's do it. There are times where I'll do in person, like I'll have conferences hire us to do a podcast for their conference. So we'll have, you know, obviously a whole setup. But I'm trying to think of nothing too crazy. I mean, because it's Zoom. I mean, people's internet cuts out. I mean, the other day, someone had a bloody nose, like got a bloody nose right before the interview. And he came on, he's like, Jeremy, I'm so sorry. I'm like, don't worry about it. Let's just reschedule. Okay. So like, I mean, stuff happens to people. I remember there was one incident, and I don't edit anything out. So I keep it like an authentic conversation. But one crazy thing that I thought was hilarious that I did not cut out of the interview. I interviewed Ryan Lee, and Ryan Lee I had been following online for a while. So he's kind of a distant mentor, and then I hired and joined one of his coaching programs. So I had him on, and I see him kind of like moving around. I didn't know what was going on. And what happened was there was a bee that was in the room, and he started swatting at it and I thought it was fantastic, and I left it in the interview, but you see him on there like, and I would do the same thing. I would run out of the room, you know, like I'm a chicken. But so you see him throughout, like this bees like flying around, and so that was.
And it was recorded.
Yeah, it was all on the interview. Yeah, and I always recommend, keeping just it. It's a medium for authentic conversation. So I didn't cut it out, and I think when we promoted the interview, we said this was great from a business perspective, but watch how he almost gets stung by a bee and how he's swatting at it. So it was a great. We just used it in the marketing of the episode.
Yeah, you used it as a angle to clickbait. I mean, like, what bee on the episode? Like, what does it? What
Some
do you
people
mean?
will be like, "Oh, we got to cut that out," but no, it's great. And even I was watching a Joe Rogan episode the other week, and they leave everything in. Even one of, if not the most successful podcast, one of the most successful, his. They're like trying to look up something. Hey, can you pull that up? And like, oh, we can't find it. And they leave all that in. It's just authentic how they're just on the fly doing research, looking something up while the guest is there. So, perfection, people like the authenticity, and it's not perfect.
They believe they are sitting in the same room. In this case, like it's everything like kind of going in life. Yeah, and about the bees, I love that. I mean, that kind of thing, it's an awesome clickbait if to opaque in this, like not only bees, but just a bee could destroy the business perspective conversation. Like, what does it mean? And the bee on the thumbnail. Yeah, that's definitely awesome for the marketing perspective. Cool. Can you tell me, please, about, so all the podcasts you prefer and you suggest it's Zoom, so which is make people even easier to start. How important it is to find out themselves on the particular niche to cover particular subject, or they can just like run left and right with the different industries to find out what's gonna be perfectly working for them. Your opinion about that?
So if someone's starting, how important is the niche or the subject, thinking about the niche, specific niche or subject matter? Yeah. I like to have like a theme, but here's the thing. It will evolve and it will grow. And so we did an episode on InspiredInsider called How to Name Your Podcast, the do's and don'ts. Because this relates to naming, right? People are like, well, I got to come up with a name. And then you start thinking, well, how do I incorporate a certain theme or niche into that name? So I'll give you the short, brief answer, but if someone wants to watch the full episode, which is you don't want to make it too specific in the name, because you don't want to paint yourself into a corner. If you decide to evolve and change that theme, okay, so like one of our clients who's a financial advisor really focuses in and helps a lot of dentists. Mm-hmm. So they could name their, like, as an ideal profile, right? So if they really wanted to serve their ideal client, they talk about, maybe they have dentists on and talk about what they're doing. Now they could serve a lot of people, but so a mistake would be obviously if they called it like the Dental Corner podcast or whatever, because they have other clients in there. And then let's say in 2 years, they're like, well, I'm not really focused on tennis anymore. I'm focused on this other niche, right? Yep. So you just have to be careful. I do like to have a theme. I'll give you an example from my own perspective, right? So the name of my podcast is InspiredInsider. And by the way, I started my podcast, I think it was 3 months I was recording interviews before I even had a name. So I would just say, hey, Anatoliy, I'm the host of the podcast where we feature top leaders, and I did not have a name. So I didn't want the name to hold me up. But I thought early on, I was going to have the foremost podcast, the number one podcast about productivity. Okay. Mm-hmm. I geek out on productivity. I love software and tools and efficiencies. So I was going to have, everything was going to be themed around productivity. So I didn't have a name at this point, but I had the first 4 guests on, all like top productivity experts. Okay. And after the fourth interview, I was like, they're saying the exact same thing. It would be terrible if I only talked about productivity all day long. I would be so bored. They're talking about the same thing, and I shifted. So luckily I didn't call it like the top productivity podcast or something like that. So my theme is more like Inspired Insider. What's inspiring? So I kept it broad. What's inspiring about people? It could be business, it could be personal or whatever, and you had a really amazing, inspiring story. So I recommend choosing a broader theme just so you don't paint yourself into a corner with it. Because then, and this gets into another question that we get, which is, well, what if I have different people and they're not necessarily connected or related? You can do, and we did an episode on the podcast, which is like a series versus a season and our thoughts on that. But you can do a series of episodes on a topic on the same podcast. Okay. Like I could still do a I could still do a productivity series on my show.
Yep.
But not call it the productivity podcast. So, it's a great question. And I tried not to overthink it early on. And that's some of the thought process I think of when you're thinking of a niche or a theme, like broaden it as much. So it will evolve. Like when I've been podcasting for over a decade, the guests I have on, the topics I do now have evolved over the years.
I started smiling when you said that I was recording like a couple of months, you said, the podcast before you would find out the name. It was something similar on my name, and still to compare you choose a real good name, Inspired Insider. It's like, whoa, it's catching the attention. It's all could be general about business, about inspiration, motivation, and productivity in the same time. So you first of all, and you done that in the right way, because means you also start speaking about the productivity and you realize that this is not what is gonna be all the time. I feel the same in dropshipping when I started in YouTube speaking about dropshipping a lot, and after that I want to speak about bigger stuff. I'm growing and I want to speak about what's happening, what totally. I know no more. I don't want to stuck on that.
If you would have been like, this is the dropshipping podcast, you would have totally painted yourself into a corner and be like, oh wait, this isn't dropshipping. Now you could do dropshipping, have some of the top dropshippers on and do kind of a series on that, but you don't have to do the whole show all the time on it.
Exactly. I love your suggestion. This is important for people to understand that, especially don't be afraid about the name. You'll call it. Just you will name it. Just start it and see how that goes. In your experience, from the beginning of the podcast to start and become kind of successful in terms of you have a network, you have some guests already invited. In your personal experience, how much time does it need to show the real value and get the crowd eyeballs on your podcast?
That's a tough question. I think I've gone across different industries and just formed an amazing network in different industries, right? And so I would say, again, if you're consistent, like I do 2 to 3 episodes a week. If in my goal when I have someone on is to give to them and to profile them and to get them clients, customers, and partners. So if I spent 6 months, interviewing 2 to 3 people in that industry, so that would be let's say 12 people a month for 6 months. Okay, so we're like 70 people. So if I interviewed 70 to 100 people in an industry that are influencers in an industry, and success is for me measured as people, I can help people. And in the same return, I form real relationships with people. So if I could form 70 to 100 relationships with some of the top people in that industry, it would probably take, 6 to 8 months, and I get known, I just know people in the industry, a lot of people, right? In this different circle. So for me, it's around, I've never really thought about it that way, but if I was like to growth hack an industry, that's what I would do. I'd probably have a list of 100 of the top people, and I would just try and give as much as humanly possible to them over a 6 to 12 month period.
Now I open for myself this subject from another angle. I appreciate that, because like it's not about even, it's our business card. Podcast, it's our business card. It's like who we are, who we speaking with, what is our network. But most important, you are building your future collaborations or like friendship, partnership while you're talking, like while we are speaking. Yeah. And that's the real value being like on the podcast all the time. And we recording now like as well up to 20 episodes a month. I mean recording but placing once in 2 weeks. In your opinion, what's the best time to post it? Every single week, every 2 weeks, once in a month, or it depends how big is your list of the audio?
I think, I mean, it's like, here's my philosophy is like, the most important thing I can do on a daily or weekly basis is connect with my best relationships, whether they're strategic referral partnerships, authorities in the space, clients, potential clients. So I make time every single day to do this, okay? Because I think it's one of the most important things I do. Now, that being said, I would be consistent. If someone's like, well, if for you consistent means putting out an episode every 2 weeks, just dedicate every 2 weeks. I mean, most of our clients, probably 90%, do once a week cadence, okay? And the other 10 do maybe once every 2 weeks, and there's a very small percentage do once a month. Because for me, it's like, well, like if you're doing one a month, you're only connecting really to 12 people this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then if you're doing 2 a month, 24, like, so I double down on what works. So I do 2 to 3 episodes a week. John, my business partner, does 2 to 3 episodes a week. So between the two of us, we may be connecting to 6 people. And I have, I think right now I am 3 months in queue. So if I do one now, even though I do 2 to 3 a week, I'm still a couple months ahead. So I'm always doing interviews and conversations. So I say, the goal for when we're working with a client, the Rise 25, is let's get you on a weekly cadence, because it's 52 conversations, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think of it like if someone focused on referral partnerships or strategic partnerships, or in the case of like an e-commerce company, an influencer, let's say you interviewed 50 influencers this year. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's say only 10% of them you formed an amazing relationship with, started recommending your products to people. That's only 5 people, but like, let's say those people's reach is really large. So 5 people is a lot. It's great, right? So we're not talking about huge numbers, but so the more conversations, the better, the more content, the better. So I do recommend a weekly cadence if you can do it. And if you can't, some people are like, oh, I can't, I'm too busy. I'm like, well, can someone else from your company help, right? It doesn't have to fall on the founder or CEO. A lot of times the companies we work with, and so we have multiple co-hosts. So there may be 2 or 3 people. So even if 2 or 3 people do 1 episode a month, you can have 1 conversation a month. That's still 1 a week.
We posting twice a month and recording, like February, we have 22 in queue for February to record. So instead of taking for longer, I understood better make it on the weekly base and fill up. Yeah, it's a great suggestion, and it's a great guidance, to be honest. And listen, like the things of the consistency, I believe, important in any kind of industry. And this is as well showing from your personal experience that it's not about only consistency, but it's about new connections which you will get. So I believe that's one of the most golden thoughts for the like people who trying to understand, should I open my podcast or should I not? That's the golden nugget. Like, listen, you have to, because I'm looking for suppliers, I'm looking for partnerships, I'm looking for affiliates, I'm looking. So instead of looking, stop looking, start talking to people on the podcast and just asking and sharing with them what's going on your side. That's awesome. Listen,
and most of the time, Anatoliy, you bring up going back to your question about the theme and the niche.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to think too hard about it, because in that case, suppliers or other people, they're in the from a content perspective. We didn't talk too much about the art and science of producing amazing content. That's one of the 5 steps. But they're in your industry, so they're going to be talking about content that's relevant to your industry anyways, right? You have a supplier on, what are you experiencing with the supply chain? What are you experiencing when you're bringing stuff over from this country or that country? So that good content will show up when you have those people on.
Yeah, that's for sure. And podcast, it's a great way to get the content on your site for social medias, for like whatever you need it for promos. It's awesome. I mean, I love that, to be honest with you. I love doing podcasts. I love to be a guest. I love to be a speaker, because I have an amazing guest like you today, and hearing different perspectives and experience, that's something what's allowed me move forward and opening for myself new understanding like about podcasts today. Today it was not just like, guys and girls who is listening now, it's not about like I invite Jeremy today to just share with you his journey. For me, it was like mentorship lesson. I appreciate it, because I got for myself the points which I'm missing.
It's a good point. In like, I always say I would do the podcast if no one listened, just from a professional development standpoint, because you could talk to top experts and ask them the questions you're curious about. Like, you could have me on, right? And you ask all the questions you're curious about. That makes for a really good interview too, because people are like, well, what about from the content piece? I say, listen, keep it simple. Just ask things you're curious about. And the people if you're asking questions you're genuinely curious about, other people will be curious about those too. So like, you have me on and we talk about podcasting, right? And you can use some of these tips in your podcast. Now, if you ask someone, hey, Jeremy, can I pick your brain for an hour? Like, I don't know. But why don't you come on my podcast? Because it's a gift to them. It's a little different positioning. So you're exactly right. I do it if no one was listening, just for the mere fact of, if we're doing like thinking about how do we do better in sales or marketing, or I did a great episode with Martin Schreif and from Site Tuners. And I was like, he's great. Someone introduced him to me, but they do conversion rate optimization. And I was like, awesome. This will be great, valuable for the audience. And he can pick apart our site and show us how we suck, how our website sucks. And so we did it live on the episode where I screen shared my site. And he was like, Jeremy, he's like, can I be honest with you? I'm like, yes, be totally honest. He's like, this is terrible. You need to do this. You need to do that. And he gave us some amazing advice on our website. So 100%, I do it if no one was listening, just for the professional development standpoint.
I love it. Thank you for your words and feedback, and especially to what piece of knowledge you have been shared today. And I have one question, which is I'm always asking at the end for all our guests. And if you don't mind, I'll ask you as well. I'm just curious what's going to be your answer. Okay?
Let's go for it.
Perfect. What would you choose, the end result or the journey?
Oh God. I used to say end result, for sure. And I think once I've had the end result, I actually appreciate the journey after the fact, right? So, but I always, I think, first err with the say end result, for sure. I want the end result, and then look afterwards. I'm like, well, it was really the journey that was most valuable. That was, when I think back on it. And every time,
answer.
regardless what it is, right? It's like one of my goals this year is to dunk a basketball, right? I don't know if it'll happen, but I just want the end result. I want to be able to dunk a basketball, but look, I'll see what the journey really makes it rewarding. But I still, if you ask me, I'm like, I don't know how I go away from, no, I just want the end result. What do other people say on this?
It's exactly what usually I'm commenting at the end after the answer. So most of the people are saying the journey, and because it's all about the journey and end results when it's happening, we're moving forward and it's a new journey going on. So the results staying behind.
I want to say that, Anatoly, but if I'm honest with myself, I think I would default to the end result. I don't know.
When you were saying, I can see, because usually people are going deep into their soul and start thinking about it. I mean, when I'm asking this question, and I feel when you are answering, first of all, you are answering what's related to you. Second thing, I love your answer because you're only the person who didn't answer end result because of let's say one of the answers was I want to exceed, I want to sell and exceed. Okay, yeah, the end result clear, but how you answer is kind of tricky because it's two answers. I mean, end result and journey, but in the way how you reply, nobody was saying, which is end result, but I love to look behind and enjoy what kind of journey was there. It's amazing. It's amazing, seriously, because nobody answered that way. So it's a unique one. I love it. Thanks, man.
Appreciate you.
So basically, we have now ending of the podcast. And guys and girls, if you have any kind of questions or you would like to study about the podcast, by the way, Jeremy has a special offer for you. If you don't mind, I will announce to them, to all the people who are listening to us. Jeremy is good, or you will say.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So because of Jeremy decided, and I appreciate that he joined in our podcast, he decided to provide you 30 minutes free consultation call for people who want to dive into such kind of industry. But the main thing is it's only for first 10 people. If there is gonna be more, please don't be upset if he won't be taking you for that, because he's really a leader in the industry. He is a busy person, but definitely it will be super valuable lesson for you, even for me, we were just talking about on the podcast. Can you imagine what is going to be one-on-one? So I appreciate for this offer, and all the details about the offer we're going to be posting under the podcast. All the links and social media names we're going to be sharing, so you can go and reach out to Jeremy and his team regarding this particular offer. And Dr. Jeremy Weisz, I was really appreciating you. And if you have anything to say to the audience before we end it, please.
No, I mean, I'm here if you have questions. Let me know. You can go to rise25.com, hit the contact button, or you can go to InspiredInsider.com and hit the contact button. And like Anatoliy said, if you're not one of I wanted to see what would be most valuable. But obviously we all have busy schedules, so I can only do a limited number, but we do have a lot of free content on Inspired Insider if you want more information too.
Amazing. Thank you, Doctor. This was Dr. Jeremy Weisz with us, and really appreciate for your time, and speak to you in the next episodes.